order for the Bartlett Economic Development Commission for the May 11th, 2015 meeting. Have a roll call.
Jerry Cabasco.
Here.
Cecilia Green.
Here.
Donna Weir.
Here.
Robert Perry.
Here.
Nyan Mehta. Jeff Petro. Tracy Smedilla.
Here.
Barry Crow.
Here.
Mike Sobel.
Here.
Okay, great. Pleased to announce we do have a quorum.
Okay. Next item on the agenda would be the approval of the April 13th meeting minutes. Do we have any discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Next item on the agenda.
We would need to ratify those minutes.
Do we all have to approve? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous voice. Carry.
Thank you.
Next item would be status of proposed downtown tax increment financing district.
Thank you.
Update, Tony?
I'd be pleased to report on that. Per the State of Illinois Tax Increment Allocation Redevelopment Act, which is a long name which everybody refers to as the TIF Act. I've looked at it recently, and it's, plus or minus 90 pages. And I'm just going to state for the record that Commissioner Nyan Mehta is present. Per the TIF Act, municipalities that are proposing the designation of a redevelopment project area must, prior to the adoption of an ordinance proposing the designation of that area, convene what's known as a joint review board to consider the TIF eligibility, or JRB for short. The JRB is comprised of a representative from each taxing district in the proposed TIF district. Not exactly every single taxing district, but what they consider the main ones are the ones that comprise a joint review board. That includes the village, the county, in this case is Cook County, in this case it's Hanover Township, School District U46, Elgin Community College, the Public Library District, the Park District, the Fire Protection District, and a public member. There was a scheduled joint review board meeting that began on April 22nd, and it was adjourned and continued until this Thursday, which is May 14th at 1 o'clock p.m. That'll be here in Village Hall Council Chambers this Thursday for further discussion and consideration. Per the state statute, the village has to hold a public hearing as well as a joint review board meeting, and the public hearing, as the name suggests, is the opportunity for those with interest in the proposed TIF district to come and comment on it. And the village board approved resolution 2015-13R, which schedules the public hearing for June 2nd. The way this would work is this Thursday the joint review board should go to a vote on their recommendation. It can go like any vote. It can be a positive recommendation or it can be a negative recommendation. If no recommendation at all is made, I've recently learned that goes forward as a positive, considered a positive recommendation. But anyhow, that's something that the village board should get notice of at their June 2nd public hearing, and like I said, at which time people can come in and comment. The last thing I had in the staff memorandum was that there'd be a town hall style meeting on May 19th, at which time the board, mayor and board would hear comments from residents and other stakeholders. This one is up in the air at this time. Our TIF consultants aren't able to make that particular meeting because they have joint review board meetings in other communities. But June 2nd is a day when if you'd like to come in and hear and submit comments, that would be a time to do that. The village board agenda for May 19th should be set within the next day or two. And if I do learn that there is going to be a town hall meeting on the 19th, as soon as I find out, I'll send out a mass email to the EDC. Again, just in case if anybody wants to come and either comment on it or just listen to what other people say. That's basically the status of it right now. And yeah, I'm ready to open it to questions. So Cecilia, you get us started.
Isn't May 19th a regularly scheduled trustees meeting?
Yeah, both of those dates are May 2nd, or I'm sorry, May 19th and June 2nd, both are. That's one of the reasons they would be scheduled for that night, because the mayor and board of trustees would already be present here. Whether that particular meeting is going to be at 6 p.m. or part of the normal board agenda, that's something else I'll have to let you know. I don't know if any of that's been completely set at this point, but I know it will be a public hearing on June 2nd.
So is that meeting run by the village trustees or the mayor or?
Right, that meeting is a public hearing. I liken it to the budget public hearing. It's, staff and elected officials, and then opening it up for public comment.
Tony, you mentioned that the library district was included as a member of the JRB. That, to my understanding, has been limited only to the Bartlett Public Library, or the Bartlett Library District. Was Poplar Creek included in that?
They're not included in this TIF, but actually the last TIF district that the village formed was the Bluff City TIF district, which is at the intersection of Route 25 and West Bartlett Road. And in that TIF, when we noticed the other taxing bodies, it was in the Elgin Library District,
so
or Gail Borden.
That's
yeah.
Right. Well, I guess I'm a little confused as to, this TIF district is going to be wholly within Cook County, and
right.
It's actually a DuPage County library district that's going to possibly bear the brunt of this
right.
should it go through. So I guess I'm confused as to why Poplar Creek wouldn't be included, since they have jurisdiction over much of Cook
Sure.
County.
I can explain that. It's for a TIF district. It's only includes the taxing bodies that are impacted by that exact TIF. So, for instance, Bartlett lies within 3 different counties. When we have our annual joint review board meeting, the Cook County representative only gets to be a part of the joint review board for TIFs within Cook County, which right now would be downtown, if it was ever adopted, and the Lake Street and 59 TIF is Cook County. Then we review the Brewster Creek Business Park TIF district, and that lies within DuPage County. So the Cook County representative doesn't have any say whatsoever in that TIF. They're not impacted at all. So it's only the DuPage County representative. And so out at Route 25 and West Bartlett Road, the Cook and the DuPage County representatives don't have any say at all in that TIF. They don't get to chime in or give their opinion or cast a vote. That one would be only Kane County. So the reason that the Gail Borden Public Library doesn't have a seat on the Joint Review Board for this proposed TIF is because none of the area of this TIF, nobody who would live within those boundaries would be paying taxes to the Gail Borden Public Library. They would just pay towards, or I should say the Bartlett Library has jurisdiction over that area, is probably the more appropriate way to say it.
So the Bartlett Library District goes all the way up to North Avenue? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes.
It does? Mm-hmm.
I don't know their exact, I got to be honest, our TIF consultants.
Bartlett, yes.
Yeah. Our TIF consultants comprise the list of taxing bodies, and, we reviewed it with them, but, if you were to live in Bartlett Town Center, that would be your home library. Are there other questions about the TIF?
Yeah, I've got a comment. On May 4th, Jeff King, who's the CFO of U46, presented comments to the board regarding the TIF district, and they passed a resolution that evening to wholly oppose the TIF. Of concern that I have is that it was Jeff King's understanding that even if the entire Joint Review Board did not, or they failed to actually pass a resolution supporting the TIF, that the Board of Trustees, the Bartlett Village Board of Trustees could still go ahead and pass this.
They could
Is that
do
right?
that. That's a good question. Sorry, I'm taking notes on
Because
this as well.
that's contrary to what we were told back in January. Yes, it was, Donna. Yes, it was. We can review the minutes. That's contrary to what we were told. We were told that that this would have to go before the Joint Review Board, and if they said no, it would go no further.
By my understanding, a Joint Review Board is they make a non-binding recommendation. If they vote against it, the village board could still pass the ordinances creating a TIF, and likewise, if they voted completely in favor of it, the board would still have the ability to vote down the creation of a TIF.
Sure.
So it's always been my understanding that a joint review board, I liken it to the Economic Development Commission or the Plan Commission or the Zoning Board of Appeals. They make recommendations to the village board, but they're considered non-binding. One thing is if they vote it down, it does change the percentages that might be needed to pass it, and that's based on the number of voting members on the board, so they would need what they consider a supermajority to pass it, which in this, it's my understanding also there will be one trustee recused from the vote, so it'll change the number of people that would have to vote it up or down. So basically it's a recommendation.
So specifically you're talking about the Board of Trustees.
Right.
Correct.
I'm saying even if the Joint Review Board voted 7-0 against the TIF, 7 straight noes or 8 straight noes, the village board could still vote to pass and adopt it.
Would I assume I'm going to assume that's Dr. Kammerer that would have to recuse himself?
That's correct.
Okay. So would there be there's been public comments and some concern about Donna's position as a public member on the Joint Review Board and as a member of the EDC. I guess my question is how Donna was elected to the Joint Review Board.
We have used a public member from the Economic Development Commission. I can speak to my 10 years with the village that Donna has been on for the past 5, and the 5 prior to that was a former commissioner. Many of you know Howard Lesh. And when I spoke with Jim about that, he said the same thing with his, I forget if it's 23 years. He said typically it's an Economic Development Commission member, mostly for the reason that they're more familiar with the area, more familiar with economic development programs like TIF. And I remember asking Donna if she could be on the Joint Review Board, and I'm going to say it was 2010, because Howard Lesh couldn't make it, and he had been doing it for a number of years. So it's a village prerogative to bring up a potential public member, and we've always used somebody from the Economic Development Commission.
And we have 8 members. And again, Donna, this is not a personal affront, but the optics on it are not very good. I've received phone calls being on the Economic Development Commission, and people are asking questions as to even how an Economic Development Commissioner could be on that, and let alone a commissioner whose business stands to benefit from the TIF.
Has there been any wrongdoing Are you saying there's some wrongdoing?
No, I didn't say that there's wrongdoing.
Well, then why would there be a
It-
problem? There's no wrongdoing.
There's the appearance of a conflict of interest.
Well, the appearance, that's a word that means there isn't any wrongdoing.
No, I think her point, and again, no offense, Donna, the point is you want to look as clean as possible. You don't want to look like you're stacking the deck. And that'd be like if my business was in downtown and they put me up there. Well, I plan to gain for it. Everybody could say that I said we should do it because I could gain from it. Now, I know Donna well enough to know that she would never do that, but the appearance is there. And you and I know that it's appearance, but it's a perception by somebody from the public that matters, and it's the perception that matters, not the truth in this case. And the perception is that somebody could have stacked the deck. And we could have done a better job, I think, picking the particular person. Again, no offense personally to you, we should have made sure that there was no conflict of interest,
Yeah.
a perceived conflict of interest.
I'm thinking this is the first time it's probably been brought up since the village's original TIF in 1986, and it's something that is being made into an issue that, heretofore hadn't ever been an issue. And, I honestly, I can't think of a better representative for the Joint Review Board, but I suppose that, when it's brought to light in that matter, it's something we can discuss, bringing on a different representative maybe in future years. But I can, understand your comments on it, sure. It hasn't really been a glamorous position to be a member of the Joint Review Board ever, and it's never been an issue. And we've always had somebody on the EDC because you're all volunteers in the community, in different, different organizations and groups. I don't know. I don't even feel like it's necessary to defend this, but that's, if I have to defend it, that's what I would say. We bring people who are parts of the community, well-known people in the community, especially people who have served on the EDC for a decade. So, the way this is all shaped up, we'll probably ask somebody else on the EDC next year to be the Joint Review Board member. It's an annual meeting. This one is for a new TIF, but we've met here every June to review our TIFs every year. And Donna's been on that for at least 4 years.
Again, I want to make it clear, I don't think that anything inappropriate was done. I think it's about managing people's perceptions, the public's perceptions. That's all.
And what I wouldn't want to have happen is I wouldn't want the decision to negatively impact this commission and what it has done. And so if the commissioners feel that there is somebody, that it would be more appropriate for me to step down and to have Tony appoint someone else, I am fine with that. My feelings would, I'm not afraid to say it here because I'll be saying it in future meetings. I'm a strong supporter of the TIF. I am hoping to bring people, and it doesn't have anything to do with my business in particular. I don't own that business. I work at that business. I don't receive any personal profit. When the bank received some TIF rebates in the past, we won't be applying for any TIF rebates in this particular TIF. I've asked if we could be eliminated from the TIF, and at this point it would be too complicated to do that. But the last thing I would want to do is to negate anything that this commission has been doing, and I definitely wouldn't want to do it without the support of the EDC commissioners. And so whatever the commissioners want to do, I am perfectly fine with, because it really, as everybody knows, how I feel about the TIF, and I will be, I'll be speaking in support of it. I'll be rallying support for it. So, as both a resident of Bartlett and as somebody who manages a business in Bartlett, I feel that there's an important reason for the success to pass the downtown TIF. But again, I just want, I want the commissioners to feel comfortable with the decisions that are made within this commission, and if they don't feel that it's appropriate that I continue on the joint board, I have no issue with it. And you can, and if Tony wants to appoint someone else or however it is that it's done, I'm perfectly fine with it.
I don't think we could find another representative for the public member for the TIF that's more knowledgeable than Donna and that has more heart for the village business people than Donna does. I give her my full support.
I do as well.
Well, I hate to succumb to appearances. I mean, if the record shows that the person is doing a good job, and the appearances of something that is nothing. So, if we want to make something out of nothing, then all of us should not be on the board, because we can make something out of nothing on every member of this board.
Right, everybody's not, necessarily in agreement with this proposed TIF at this time. This sounds kind of trite, but this is part of the TIF process, the joint review board, the public hearing. If anything, the village, this is according to our consultants who've done 300 TIFs, our village has been more deliberate in the TIF than other communities have been. We've gone out of our way to, continually present information. I can't speak for everybody in the village, but I know Jim and I have met with people from various taxing bodies. We've sent them a lot of information. We've done research for them on the TIF statute, or I should say, since the last joint review board meeting. And so, I'm just going to say that we're dotting all the I's and we're crossing all the T's, and ultimately the joint review board's going to come to some type of vote, maybe not a consensus, and then forward their recommendation to the village board. And of course, you all know the village board, that's part of their role, is to make votes or take votes for issues like that. I only say that because, there have been a lot of issues raised in it, but I believe that's part of the normal, maybe this isn't the normal creation of a TIF, but that's part of the, that's part of the way it has to be done by the state statute, hearing upon hearing, giving these other taxing bodies a chance to weigh in. That's where we're at right now. It's later in the stage of this TIF creation than early. The studies have been done. The joint review board started. I believe they'll come to some type of vote this Thursday. Then it'll be essentially in the village board's hand at that point. The whole thing emanated from when the EDC first started the first discussions on how to improve the downtown business district. That was the June 2013 meeting, the first meeting we had on that. So it's been a long time in the works. And as a staff person, I've been working on the TIF for over a year at this point, with research, meetings with the consultants, and it's research intensive when they present all the EAVs, and all the vacancy status, and they do all the field surveys for all the buildings. So, like Donna said, I'm comfortable with the TIF report. It easily qualifies, and it meets 6 of the blighting factors, even though, remember, this is considered a conservation TIF, which means 50% or more of the buildings within the district would have to be 35 years or older. I can't remember exactly, but it's about 70%. And there's a list of blighting factors, and only 3 of those have to be met to make it qualify as a conservation district. I don't really see a lot of people challenging the qualification factors, but that's part of the plan. That's part of the TIF documents, and the bigger part of it is the TIF redevelopment plan, and that's where there's been more questions and debate. But also that's why we rely on our TIF consultants to help us through that. Like I said, the TIF statute, the fire district wanted me to send them a copy of the TIF statute to review. I sent them a link, and it was 97 pages. But what we did was I looked for the specific section they were looking for and highlighted it. For those of you who didn't hear about that portion of the Joint Review Board meeting, there's a requirement, if there's a no vote at the Joint Review Board, there's a requirement for the Joint Review Board to put in writing the reasoning behind the no vote back to the village. And the village actually then also has a chance to respond to those questions. So it's quite a process. That's why we've had it on the EDC agenda for quite some time, and I wanted to keep everybody on the EDC, the most up to date as possible on where it's at. So it's getting to be pretty late in the process.
We discussed this for 3 months before making a recommendation to the board that we approve a TIF district.
Right.
I feel very comfortable with the decision. I support what Donna just said. I see no other viable alternative to stimulate any growth in the downtown area. So I don't know why we're even discussing now why we shouldn't support it or wouldn't be in favor of it.
Yeah, it's a widely used tool, and considering
it's up to the board now,
high amount
based on the input they get from the public, and
right. Right. And there's like anything, like any major issue that goes before the village board, there's no guarantee that it'll pass. I'm not, I don't believe it's guaranteed to pass at all. But it's something that, the EDC put a lot of time and thought into it. I can tell you for sure our staff and consultants put a real lot of thought and time into it. And that's why I'll say I'm very comfortable with the TIF plan. And if you look at, I think I sent a link that I took from the Illinois Tax Increment Association. There's over 1,000 TIFs in Illinois. And if you go through the downtowns, of all the downtowns we heard about earlier on in this process, when you talk about Barrington and Elmhurst and Glen Ellen and Naperville and Skokie and on, they all utilize TIF as a means to provide incentives. If we get to the point where we create a TIF and we generate some increment, that's the information I'll be bringing to you. Here's Mike Sobel had asked about that a few months ago. Lessons learned and best practices. We'll bring that in front of you and say, here's the way, this town brought in a grocery store. Here's the way this town helped incentivize a small restaurant. Later on in the meeting, you'll see a report from Lucky Jack's and Papa Pacino's, and you'll see, TIF is a very relevant issue for them. So anyway, I've spoken enough about TIF. Are there any more
I just want to
questions?
remind you, Tony, I asked last meeting that you provide us all that letter and the map
Yeah, I checked on that. I sent the letter the next morning.
to the other people. Oh, I'm sorry.
Everybody on the EDC.
Oh,
Yeah.
did you get it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, we got it
Pretty
electronically.
big email, actually.
Oh, all right.
I saw there were 5
I must have
attachments.
missed it. Yeah.
It's okay.
So I think because we did all vote for it, I don't think there were any dissenting votes on the TIF recommendation, except Barry wasn't here, I
Right.
think it behooves all of us to, because we represent our wish to have a healthy Bartlett business community to, spread the word to people. And maybe overcome some of the misperceptions that are out there.
Celia, I will just remind you that I did abstain on that vote because I felt like, personally, I felt like I didn't have enough information to make a very informed
You did not
recommendation.
vote no.
I did not. I abstained from voting on it.
Right, that's correct. It went, that recommendation went 6-0 out of the 7 commissioners that were there that night, including Tracy.
I don't think anybody should be surprised about the taxing body's negative view of it. It's pretty predictable. I mean, I fully expected it. In fact, I think they even commented on it before I voted to approve it, that I knew they were going to come back and be against it, considering the most recent one recently expired.
That's a good point.
You know, I think you have to wait for public opinion now, see who shows up at the meetings and see what they say. But I think that's pretty predictable, too. You know who's going to show up, people who are against it.
Well, and some of them are
You know?
so ill-informed, they really don't know what they're talking about. They really are making statements that are half-truths and
Well, I think we still need to be sensitive to those public comments. We've got DuPage residents that are still reeling from a tax error out of Cook County and then an increase on their property taxes. I think businesses are feeling that same pinch. I think there's still, in the public perception, there's still some suspicion as to whether or not a $17.5 million bond float is going to make a difference in that area.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Some of the negative comments I've heard are people who don't believe there will be more development in the downtown. In addition to worrying about, it's hard for me to explain it, lost revenues for potential development that I don't believe would happen without a TIF. There's people who don't believe that Bartlett Plaza, Gorski's, could be redeveloped, or that some of these older buildings in the downtown could be fixed up and reoccupied. But if you read through and I know you've all seen the TIF documents, that's the core of it. There's no secret hidden in the TIF documents. It's for rehabbing older, dilapidated, obsolete, and vacant buildings. That's the main reasoning behind pursuing it.
Yeah, I haven't heard anybody come up with any other alternative
Right, and
to
that too.
revitalizing the downtown. I know the newspaper's vehemently against it. Our local newspaper, nice editorial. You know, he didn't come up with any solution on his own either. He was just critical of it.
Well, there's a lot of bad perception out there, not bad, improper perception about what was done with the last TIF, because a lot of the stuff was very underground, and by underground I mean literally underground, environmental cleanup and things of that nature. The average Joe didn't see that benefit, and they didn't realize that, oh, there was an environmental hazard headed towards an apartment complex that the village would have been responsible for, and it paid for that, a lot of other things, and really the only thing that most of the people remember is, oh, we got these really cool street lights and a nice cityscape that people hated at first but really love now.
Thanks for bringing that up, because I can tell you from having met probably with thousands of developers in my career, there's not any of them that would want to pay for environmental cleanup or new sewer pipes or new drainage or building new roads. That's all the nuts and bolts infrastructure that the first TIF helped provide. This TIF would still have that element in it, because as you recall, there is some older infrastructure under the ground. That doesn't excite the public. It doesn't excite me or you very much either. But also it would have a greater element of potential incentives for these older buildings. They're not getting any newer. I think the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. Some of these buildings have been vacant for 5 or more years. That's something that our TIF consultant, Bob Ryschlicki, said at the meeting. This isn't normal vacancy. Normal vacancy is plus or minus 10%, and normal vacancy is a space being vacant, let's say 3 to 6 months. Normal vacancy is not 24% vacancy for 5 years. So anyway, I'm going on about that quite a bit, but that you're right. A lot of it was underground, and some of this TIF would also provide for that. That's a TIF eligible cost, and it's something that a private developer might want infrastructure to support new development, but not have the wherewithal to be able to pay for that on their own. So that's something that TIF can provide. That's one of those that's on that list of the $17 million budget you referred to.
And I like Gary brought up the fact that nobody brought up any alternatives. So let's say the alternative is that we don't have a TIF district. What's going to happen to all the properties? Are they going to get any better, or are they going to get worse? Are we going to continue to lose tax dollars because these buildings are empty, they're not being filled, and nobody's paying taxes on them? I would think one of the things what TIF would do is get these places filled so we have taxes coming in to help reduce our tax bill. We are residents of Bartlett, and I think we have to look at our own. Nobody's going to help nobody's come in with money for Bartlett that I know of. We have to do it ourselves.
That's true. That's well put. I like to tell people, think of yourself as a visitor coming from out of town or out of state who's never seen Bartlett before. And I meet with people in that situation, not all the time, but at least once a month. I'm meeting with a potential business or developer from out of town, and they say, yeah, what's with the boarded up building and the empty store down there? And there's some things that make it less attractive to them. And what's the first thing they ask for? Well, what type of incentive do you offer if I were to do something like this? The redevelopment costs of these buildings are equal or higher to new construction almost in some cases. They're very comparable. So that's one of the goals. I again say if there's a TIF created, that will give the village, as you said, flexibility to seize more control over the village's own destiny for the downtown area, instead of hoping or waiting for the private market to do it.
So what does the community plan look like for that area, Tony? I mean, that's really been on my mind for the last several months. We talk about upgrading the area, especially around Gorski Plaza, but if it means just rehabilitating space for more retail, I think that's where my hesitancy has been.
But that is about what it would be.
And we can go back to the Spartan marketing report, and I think John Carnias and his students had some exceptional ideas about creating actual businesses that would provide for reverse commuters, people that would be getting off the train in Bartlett to go to work. So I would hope that there would be a discussion of we talk about building infrastructure. It would be things like fiber optics that would support technology businesses, or perhaps even medical offices that do digital imaging, where you have employees coming in, and those employees in turn could support the existing downtown businesses.
I should specify, that's another good point I want to address. Some of the buildings would have an obvious use, like I'm going to say Lucky Jack's would obviously be a bar and grill, not a high-tech office. But a space like the empty grocery store absolutely could be redeveloped into a medical use or an office use, absolutely. And nothing wrong with that at all. But that building itself, for the just roundabout dollars to convert that old grocery store, and I'm not going to get into all the code violations that are over there, it would take at least $1 million to convert that space.
Sure.
And unless you have somebody like Central DuPage Hospital that just had to be there, and money, is not an object, and they would want to do it no matter what, they could do that. but most of the buildings here are not in that situation, where somebody like that's going to come in and do that, completely on their own dime. So that's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up. Filling it with lots of office uses that would actually be people here. That's another big economic development word, is daytime population. Our daytime population here is pretty low. And if we could get a company with 100 people in it in Gorski Plaza, that would be fantastic. Then they would patronize the restaurants. We do have restaurants downtown. We would, they would like to have more patrons around during the daytime hours as well. So that's a good point. It's not just, it's less focused on business. The TIF plan doesn't necessarily address business type. It says mixed use commercial. That's the term. It's all encompassing. It's offices, personal services, restaurants, and shops. Downtown Bartlett is more, that's what it is now. More personal services probably than other types of businesses, but restaurants and just a few stores, shopping, retail stores.
I believe the owners of that plaza, the Gorskis, have looked into many things doing for that empty space. I think they've come to the conclusion that the amount of money it would take for another business to come in there would not be feasible for a business to do that when they could find other locations where they wouldn't have to spend as much money. Which in conclusion, the Gorskis are even considering knocking that building down. Because right now, it's been costing them tax dollars for an empty building.
That's accurate. I speak with them frequently, and that's something they certainly are considering. It's been vacant for quite a while, and the businesses that have looked in there have fallen into basically two categories. One, where it would be a business that I think a retail or grocery type business that people in the area would really like, but they don't want to come in and do the expenditures without some type of incentive. And the other types that have looked in there are smaller, maybe even more towards the startup range, and just can't even consider that type of investment. They both would like incentives, but for instance, once Aldi's came and looked at it years ago, they stated flatly if they like the site, they would rebuild it on their own. Aldi's is a wealthy enough corporation to do that. But on the flip side, people who are looking to open, say, a big resale shop or something of that nature, they can't, those people have looked at it and they've been overwhelmed by the amount of investment that would be required. There's other buildings in the TIF, but that's an important one. That would be the biggest shopping center in the downtown TIF, and so that would be a likely recipient of TIF funds at some point.
Are there currently developers considering doing something because there is a TIF that could be possibly passed, that they would consider doing something in the center?
There are, and they've been invited to attend the June 2nd meeting. They've had it under contract for over a year, and they have attempted to extend their contract, waiting for the TIF to be adopted, as a matter of fact. And it's, I'll let him rather than me divulge who it is, but let them come and state, if they have interest in it still. I've invited them to come, and they own about 8 shopping centers in the area. They've done that with pretty much all of them. They've taken centers that look like Bartlett Plaza, and they've turned them into basically occupied sales tax producing, property tax producing business properties. So the answer to that is yes. There's somebody who would be interested in that property.
Okay, that appears to end the discussion on the status of the TIF district. Tony, you want to move on to the next agenda item and discuss the new tabletop display?
I'd love to. You see it all sitting there right in front of you.
That that I could see sitting on the floor and not on a tabletop?
I'm sorry, I will have to miss some of the important for the few points, but I need to leave if you don't mind. Can I be excused? I have to take an evening little flight, so can I leave right now?
Of course. Yeah, we still have quorum.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Nayan. This is the new tabletop display. As Jerry pointed out, it's on the floor right now. And this is for
Looks like a floor display.
area trade shows. I call it a tabletop display because it's less than 6 feet wide. And typically, when I am at a trade show, what they give you, besides your booth space, is a table about as wide as where I'm sitting right now. And that can obviously be put on there. I would have liked to demonstrate it, but I set that up in less than a minute. My last booth, the booth that I've been using since 2006 that we designed at the EDC almost 10 years ago, is a 10-foot wide, 8-foot tall booth that I drag around in multiple cases and takes more like 30 minutes to set up and 30 minutes to break down, and is fallen into disrepair. It has pictures of businesses that are no longer there, and it was time to update it. So that's what this is in front of you. I showed it to you, the graphic designs for it, probably 2 or 3 meetings ago, and it breaks down just about as easy as it sets up. So I'm pretty excited about it. You can see it's a good variety of photos, including some in Brewster Creek, some well-known businesses, the gazebo, the welcome sign, town center, Two Toots, golf course and train station, among others, Villa Olivia. And could we fit every single thing about Bartlett on that? No, we couldn't. But I think somebody who is walking by looking at a trade show of 60 towns in a row can probably get a decent feel for the village. And keeping in mind, I give out handouts at these trade shows, and all the handouts and displays in the world aren't as valuable as really selling the town, face to face. So, but this is something that I take to a couple of ICSC shows. You've heard me say that one a lot. I'll just remind you, International Council of Shopping Centers. The name's a little misleading because every retailer of a regional and national scale is a member, and every developer and shopping center owner of a regional or national nature is a member. And not necessarily for a lot of the small mom and pop businesses that I work with a lot in Bartlett, but if you want to talk to a Starbucks or a Trader Joe's or a Jersey Mike's or an Aldi's, the ICSC show's the place to do it. So I'll be bringing that to a couple shows per year, and there's also an industrial show or two that I'll be bringing that to as an exhibitor, and actually be bringing it tomorrow to the Bartlett Library where I'll be doing a presentation. So it should get some good usage. And all I wanted to do was show it to you. The thing I love about it is it fits into that small carrying case. And I set it up in less than a minute, and it takes me about 2 minutes to break it down. So it's not going to be cumbersome at all. The only one thing I worried about when I told my family about it was I might get a bike chain to chain it to a table on a show so it doesn't disappear while I walk to the bathroom. So it's very lightweight, and really I love it. So I hope you all like it as well. Any questions about the new tabletop?
I think they did a good job.
I agree. It was designed between myself and a graphic designer named Howie Vitek that I've utilized his services from year to year, and I ordered it through a business called Mark Your Space right here in Brewster Creek Business Park. Mike Sobel owns it. So it was a good, good to work with both of them, and it came out even better than it looked like on paper, so I'm happy with it. The last one I mentioned, last thing about it, the last one I ordered in 2006, so it's 2015. This one was only about $500, so, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, we could change the design of it in a few years. It would be, it's basically a cloth design. I'd like to use that until we really need to replace it. I don't know when that would be, but there's no reason we'd have to replace it within the next 5 years that I can see. Maybe we could add to it. A lot of times I put up banners as well, so probably the next thing I'll do is order a banner that basically replicates that look. The branding logo is facing me, but you've got the welcome sign and the branding logo on it. And like I said, it's 2015 now, right? So maybe we'll use that till 2020. Questions? Thank you.
Did a nice job on it.
Thank you.
Okay, move on to the next agenda item, which would be the business visitation at Pacino's Tap House.
Thank you. This is a visit that was done about a month ago. Mike Sobel and I visited with the owners of Pacino's Tap House. This was a visit that the administration here asked me to do, look into their status, because of the neighboring building, Lucky Jack's. Everybody knows that building, one of the oldest in the town, if not the oldest, closed down over 3 years ago. I'm not going to read through the entire report for you, but the gist of it is that that building was subject to business partners that broke up, some personal issues. It later went into the foreclosure process and a lawsuit. It was a very long process. I was asked about it constantly for a long time, and we would follow the court case, and I would report it next goes to court this day or that day, and it would get continued. Finally, it went through the foreclosure process and became bank-owned. Earlier this year, it went to sheriff's auction. Meanwhile, one of the former partners in Lucky Jack's, who's also one of the owners of Pacino's, Mr. Gary Dano, was following it, and he has a new business partner that we met with named Mike Olson. Mike Olson purchased the Lucky Jack's building at the sheriff's sale a few months ago, so he's the owner of that building. They run, but they are business partners. That's why this was really a business visit to two businesses, is what it was like. They operate a lot of other businesses. They've been, those of you who know Gary Dano, I didn't realize, I know he'd been into that business for a long time, but he said since 1985. So 30 years he's been affiliated with that business. They haven't done as great, as how I'm going to put it, as they have in previous years. They have video poker machines that help them, maintain their business. They're another partnership that, the best way I can put it, and then I'm going to let Mike add whatever I miss on this. They're very interested in the TIF, the potential TIF. That would be, I think, one of the earliest TIF redevelopment projects from what how our conversation went. Flipping to the second page of this report, they had architects come look at the building. Actually, Mike and I met with them on a Friday, but they had their architect in there looking at the buildings all week, and they estimated a minimum of $300,000 would be the rehabilitation cost for the former Lucky Jack's building. And even though Pacino's Tap House is nice on the interior, it meets code, it's open, They estimated about another $50,000 in rehab that they would like to do for that building. That would, the $350,000, it's a lot of money. What that would include rehabilitating the inside of the former Lucky Jacks extensively to meet current code requirements. Without getting into, Mike and I didn't get into great detail with them, but their code requirements would be everything. That would be electric, that would be plumbing, that would be fire suppression, and that would be, the rest of the build out, the floors, the walls, the ceilings, the lighting, basically everything is the best way I could put it. They would also like to do some outdoor improvements, including the parking lot, garbage enclosures, new signs, completely new facade. They would like to add an outdoor space for live entertainment. They told us that they don't want to just do a patch-up job. They would really told us that their goal was to really extensively renovate it, make it look beautiful, make it a centerpiece for downtown Bartlett. So what they told us is they want to redevelop and connect these buildings the right way. They admitted to us that they were considering tearing one or both of them down if they couldn't work out some type of redevelopment deal. One of the owners, Mike Olson, the one who bought the former Lucky Jacks building, is an attorney, and he has done incentive deals before, so he knew what we were talking about when we were discussing the proposed TIF district. Mr. Dano, he noted that he's part owner of Pacino's and several other restaurants. He's kind of a hands-off type manager. We also met with their manager, a gentleman named John Gianforte. He's the one who runs the business there. But he walked us kind of through the history of his former partnership on those buildings and where that went south. Has big plans and hopes for them both in the future. That's another party that I told about the June 2nd hearing because they're very interested in the TIF district. As a matter of fact, of the people I've met with, they're basically the most interested. So they would, it's been, I don't want to go on about the building, but it's been somewhat of an eyesore for a number of years. It's a very prominent location, and yet it's a great location, right in the middle of downtown, right across from the train station. So the short of it is they do want to rehabilitate and redevelop those properties. They want some type of TIF incentive from the village, and along with whoever comes on the June 2nd meeting to speak out against it, I'll remind them of that date as well if they want to come in and say something about it also. But that was our business visit to them. There had been a lot of speculation and questions about those businesses from the EDC, from elected officials, from other staff, from other businesses. Lots of people wanted to know what's going on over there, so we tried to find out right from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And Mike, not to put you on the spot, but I must have forgotten something about our meeting with them.
No, they're just pretty savvy businessmen that, I will say, do this semi-regularly. They've got a lot of properties throughout the Chicagoland area that they kind of go in and rehab and, take a piece of, like, downtown Roselle that was kind of just sitting there, and they develop it into something that sticks. They talked about plans of, opening up two different places, with two different types of themes,
Right.
one pub maybe and another, kind of wine / higher end place, to taking a huge chunk of that block and turning it into what I call, and this is probably an overstatement, an entertainment complex, so to speak, but, have two places and maybe a joint patio with a place for live music, et cetera, et cetera. So they do have some cool visions for it. Be really neat if what they said they could do could happen down there. It'd be awesome.
Right. And they weren't, they weren't trying to provide an ultimatum or anything at all. They just said, we have to look at our bottom line here. They operate other businesses. I don't know if they ever said it blatantly, but that Bartlett's the least, profitable of them. They said they've had great success in other communities with their concepts. And even though Gary Dano's been a partner in there for a long time, he wants to relaunch it, redo it. Thanks for remembering that. They wanted to do, actually, on the Lucky Jack side, perhaps a higher-end concept is what they told us. So, that's something that could be a good potential redevelopment type project if we do get a TIF. If there isn't a TIF, I couldn't speculate, as to whether they would do that on their own or not. But they made it sound pretty unlikely.
They made it sound pretty likely that they would have to take the same route that Gorski will and say, is it worth paying the real estate taxes for developed property? They were pretty overt about saying that.
Yeah. Yeah.
They said it would cost them a lot less just to tear everything down and pay less taxes.
And that's understandable. Paying property taxes on a vacant structure year after year nobody wants to do that. Any other questions about our visit?
It's good to hear that there's businesses in Bartlett that are thinking of improving, and rehabbing, or even knocking down. Because since 2009, real estate industry for, I don't know, until 2012 has been in dumps, as all of you know. If you were in the real estate business, your phone didn't ring for 2.5 years. So this kind of atmosphere for doing anything as far as opening a business is just, it's not happening. Finally, there's some light at the end of the tunnel. It looks like the real estate industry is trying to get back on its feet. So I think the timing for the TIF would be good at this time.
Yeah, I agree with that. They seemed like they were waiting to see what transpired with that, and that they would definitely take that into consideration with their plans. It's funny. Gary Dana, one of the things I did put in my report, he said, he's fallen in love with the old building and with the downtown. He wants to do something with it. It's just not economically viable for him to pour all that money into such an old building without some type of incentive or assistance. And that's a type of project you'll see typical in some other town TIF, some other downtown TIF districts for a restaurant or a big bar and grill or entertainment facility. So it was an interesting visit, to say the least. We were with them for a couple hours, actually.
We can move on to the next agenda item, which would be new business. Got anything on that, Tony?
I do, but I'll be brief. I have a Startup Smart-Up presentation tomorrow at the library. This is a pretty cool series that the library and Chamber of Commerce have been doing together, where they invite people, aspiring entrepreneurs, and do different presentations of how to start a business. And I helped come up with the title of this, because how do you make village paperwork and licenses sound fun? It's hard to make it sound fun. Permits, applications, and paperwork, oh my. And that's tomorrow night at 6:30 at the library. And I just want to comment real quickly on it, because a lot of people I meet with, and they've got their business name, they've got their financing, they've got their business plan in place, and then I tell them, well, you need to get a special use permit, or you need to get an occupancy permit, or you need to get building permits, and it deflates things a little bit sometimes. And this this will be me as the friendly economic development person from Bartlett, but reminding people that they need to come in and do paperwork with the village to be able to obtain a business license. And I have a little presentation about that tomorrow. So people who are thinking of starting their own business won't be completely surprised when they come in and learn, some of the steps that they need to take. Because you'd be surprised at how many people don't realize, some of the things involved with getting a business license. And so anyway, that's what that is. Last I heard, there were 13 people registered, but that was a week ago, so I'm hoping for more. Number 2, Smokin' Pit Barbecue opened last Friday. That's in Bartlett Commons Shopping Plaza. I was in there today. They had a big opening. There've been a run on the place, and they've been running out of food, but they've been doing very well. I was there around 2 o'clock today, and there were still people pouring in. So I only bring that up because I sat here 3 months in a row telling you it will be open by the time there's the next meeting, and I was really worried that I would be saying that one more time, but they opened it last Friday. Number 3, I have a group I meet with I call the Dominic Support Group. We call ourselves the Dominic Support Group. We have come up with a list of 36 potential businesses. They're mostly grocers, again, but there's a few non-grocers on the list, like Burlington Stores, Dick's Sporting Goods, Lowe's, and Target. But we've divided, as you recall, there's 10 empty stores, but there's 9 towns, because Naperville has 2 empty Dominics. We've divided the 36 by 9, so each one of us has 4 that we're going to contact again. I got my assignment. We're first alphabetically, so I got the first 4 on the list. So I'm going to be contacting 4 businesses. 2 of them that I've contacted already and turned the village down, very cold, Piggly Wiggly and Garden Fresh Market. But I will be contacting them again with the One Call 10 Store marketing initiative. So they'll look at Bartlett and the other communities. And then there's 2 that I haven't, but I'm assigned to contact Publix and Weiss Markets. And I looked them up today, and none of them are even within 500 miles of Illinois. So we're calling some businesses that have no presence in this market to say, by the way, if you're thinking of breaking into the Chicago area market, we've got all these empty Dominics. So anyway, those are the 4. I didn't pick those 4. I was assigned those 4. So those are businesses I'm going to be contacting this month. But instead of just sending them the Bartlett store, I'm going to send them all 10. But do the same thing. I'm going to email it to them. I'm going to do the friendly call a couple days later. Did you get it? What do you think? Most times they don't answer, or you leave them a message, and then so I'll call again the next week until I speak with a human being over there. So those are the 4. And last but not least, on my new business, the RTA downtown study, you folks, that was one of the many recommendations the EDC made. If you recall, we applied for it. We got approved for it. The village board just last meeting approved it's a $25,000 village contribution out of a maximum $125,000 for an RTA study. There were 4 submittals to do the downtown comprehensive plan for Bartlett. We call this a transportation-oriented development plan. And so it should be, I'm not going to pinpoint an exact date, but I would say probably by our next meeting, the consultant will be selected and approved. So, that's going to move forward. And much like the TIF, when I reviewed the proposed timelines of these, it's pretty major. They're plus or minus a year-long studies, and they include numerous public meetings as well. So that's going to be something big, a new comprehensive plan for downtown Bartlett. And mostly result of a grant from the RTA. So that's all my new business for tonight. And
I have some new business I'd like to add. Last Friday, I attended the Kane County 2015 Leader Summit. It was a bunch of state officials and local officials, and they pretty much discussed the 2040 plan for Kane County. And there's quite a bit of information that was presented. However, I'm not a fan of killing trees. Tony and I, within the next week or so, most of this is already on the stick, and we will all get you a copy, and at your leisure, you can digest it, see what you like, because there's probably 1,000 pages of information.
Good sleeping material.
And that's a 2040 plan, you said?
Yes.
So
For
that's,
Kane County.
that's a major, that's a major undertaking for a plan like that.
Yes.
So, thank you.
Terry, can you just give us a outline of some of the highlights of the meeting?
Illinois Department of Transportation officials explained all of their new potential routes. There was a big, beautiful map that they went through, farmlands, development. The majority of it is west of Randall Road and then east of 47. So that's kind of like the corridor that they look at. They talk about how they raise money, and it was very generic. There was probably 200 people that attended this summit. And what was interesting about it is, as you look at planning and as you look at strategies for whatever, whether it's a business or a community or a city, to think that far ahead, and then it always becomes a matter of how the follow-up is done and what is actually accomplished. So, if I'm not answering your question directly, it's because there was a lot of strategy that was proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, final agenda item would be adjournment. Do we have a motion?
I motion.
All in favor? Oh, we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.